Ryan, big movie for Marvel this week. Can we agree on that?
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
And not just in terms of what has come before for this franchise, but what has been going on for Disney outside of this franchise, and what's going to happen for Disney Marvel moving forward.
Yep.
Fair assessment?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the big question is this going to have one big weekend or is it going to have legs? So that's, which is something that we really weren't talking about with Marvel just a couple of years ago. And it's become, they were the exception to the rule, and now they've kind of moved back into being just like everybody else.
Being just like everyone else. And to be fair, the argument coming in of late, the last few movies, especially after the way Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania just fell off a cliff, was that, well, you can't really judge Marvel going forward by Guardians 3, which is what we're talking about, because that's going to make money. That was just taken as a given. Death, taxes, gravity. Guardians 3 is going to make money. Projections kind of got rounded down a little bit in the lead up, and have gotten rounded down a little bit in the lead up. It opens this coming Friday. What kind of opening? Let's start with what kind of opening do you think it's going to have? And then we'll start talking about why we think that.
Oh, geez. I mean, you would think 100, but
you would almost. And again, I think that's been the conventional wisdom going in.
Yeah.
Is that Guardians was going to make money, at least out of the gate. So yeah, if it's not 100, that's huge.
Yeah. It would be, and I think it'd be pretty scary for Disney, actually, because I'm sure that this film costs at least $300 million to make, another couple $100 million to promote. So they're looking again at the situation, and again, this is not new. That they have to make $700 million to break even, but they've been able to do that quite easily in the past on these films, and it's only again recently that's become something that's more of a challenge, where they have to start looking to the streaming rights and the minuscule home video sales, and
Right.
a lot of that other stuff to kind of pad the sales. So it's a big film for them, and I think but it's not. I don't think it's just a big film for Disney, though. I think it's a big film for the industry as well. I think everyone's going to keep their eyes on this, because this might dictate, if this does poorly, how is the Flash going to do? How is these films that aren't really quite on the same level, but are wanting to be on the same level? What kind of money are they going to make?
Yeah, so let's talk about this. The third entry, still by James Gunn, who is no longer with Marvel.
Correct.
He has moved over to DC, which has issues of its own, which we've talked about and will talk about moving forward, especially with the Flash coming up. But the last ride of the classic Guardians. Let's talk about this. No spoiler. This one is a heartstring movie.
Yeah.
And I honestly at this point I'm of the opinion that it's there's too much heart, not enough humor, and that's weird for me to say considering how badly I trash Love and Thunder for having way too much humor. There's not enough humor in this Guardians film. I mean, it's almost just like dark followed by dark followed by dark followed by gray followed by dark. I don't know how I feel about that in this particular franchise.
Well, I think, for me, a lot of the humor, I think a lot of the humor was based around who was the lead character. And for the first two films, it was Star-Lord. And I would say that he is not the lead in this film. and so the film takes on a completely different sort of tone. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't humor. There is, but I think you're right. It's a much more serious film, and even the comedy in it is, I don't know. There's a different energy here. There's a different purpose here. This isn't a film that's going to end with a dance off.
No.
And it would feel wrong if it did. Whereas you have a film that does end with a dance off, and it feels acceptable. For what it. So yeah, I think this is different than what we've had before.
All the same cast, with the exception that Groot looks like Terry Crews as opposed to Vin Diesel.
He's a little wide.
He's a little stocky Groot, and a lot of times it looks like it's a guy in a practical suit, which it might be.
It is, yeah.
Well, but it looks weird.
If you look at the credits, there is an actor credited with being on set, which is not any different. But I think that it didn't bug me. I don't think you're wrong, and that there's a redesign there, and he looks like
they kind of try to justify it
a
little bit.
He's a football player rather than a basketball player.
Yeah. But so this is not Peter Quill's movie.
No.
It's Rocket's movie. And I don't, obviously we hate to spoil, so we don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
But this movie is about Rocket, and how his extended dysfunctional adopted family reacts to certain things. We have a new big bad that we won't see again after this movie, as Marvel has a tendency to do. The High Evolutionary, which I don't know how I feel about him either. Man, this is PG-13. A couple of things. PG-13. We disagreed on this kind of after the film. Your 6-year-old might have issues with parts of this film, thinking that it's a happy-go-lucky Rocket movie.
Sure. And I don't disagree with that. My disagreement was that how inappropriate is that, and I don't and I can only judge myself as a from coming from the perspective of how I would have seen the film as a kid, and I would have recognized that there was some pretty creepy stuff going on here and some horrific stuff. And it certainly doesn't make me feel bad for being a vegetarian.
No, I bet it doesn't.
So, no, I mean there is some animal stuff in this film, some experimental. The High Evolutionary fellow is trying to make the perfect
society.
Well, and the perfect creatures to live in that society, not necessarily one creature, but
right.
he at least wants to try to elevate numerous groups rather than just one group.
Right.
Although I think in the end he would settle for that one group if he could just get that one group. So I think his idealism kind of fades throughout the narrative, but.
It does, and I'm not saying that stuff is inappropriate for the story James Gunn is trying to tell you.
No, and but yes, I was a little surprised because when I went through the publicity photos, there are images of the animals, in their alternate form, I guess is, I don't know, in their post experiment form. And while a still photo is never as creepy as something moving, I think you get a sense of kind of where this darkness goes. And yeah, the rabbit, I think it's a rabbit.
Yeah, it's the rabbit. It's Floor. Floor the rabbit.
Yeah, Floor. Yeah. Could that be a joke about Fleur? the rabbit. Anyway,
I kind of thought that as well.
But yeah, it's a little disturbing. Yeah, and I don't, I guess as a parent, you have to decide. You can. I think the problem here is that yes, this is fictional, and no, as far as we know, there's probably not somebody doing these specific experiments on animals, but are there experiments on animals? Yes. So
Yes.
if that's is that a conversation you're prepared to have with your child? I guess.
Yes. I'm not. I have a political statement that I actually made during the movie that I'm not going to make because I try not to do that on this podcast. But the first thing jumped to my head was something like that.
Yeah.
It's a very specific reference too, and I'll tell you after. But no, and the other thing, so a little bit was made about how this movie was going to have the first F-bomb in the MCU.
Yeah.
And wasn't that wasted?
Mm-hmm. I couldn't care less.
Well, if you're going to have it, that was a wasted place to put it.
Yeah, no, it was just like, can we put it here?
Right.
Why not?
It's like, well, why don't you actually? I mean, I could have come up with a dozen better places for that than where they put it, and it's just
sure. I mean, it wasn't, and if you think back, and it wasn't this Marvel universe, but the X-Men version of the Marvel universe, when they gave Logan, Mr. Wolverine, the line, it made a whole lot more sense. Like
it had the impact that word should have.
Yes.
And in here, it's just, oh look, we got the first F-bomb in the MCU. Why? Because Deadpool's coming next year, and they wanted to beat him to the punch. Deadpool 3 is coming, so they wanted to stop him. I'll bet. I almost guarantee that's what it was. Man, they could have picked 100 better places to put that in this movie than where they put it. Came, and I was like, is that it? Is that where we're at with that? Like, that's just terrible. I thought the performances were okay.
Yeah, no, I don't have any. No, that's
the special effects weren't bad. So I think James Gunn was, I don't know, nice to his effects house.
Yeah, you would, I guess.
So they weren't angry at him and just turning in, half done homework.
Yeah.
It was fun. Did you notice at the beginning of the film that everyone seems a little fat?
Yes.
That it's like, oh, we apparently haven't been working very hard as Guardians of the Galaxy.
And that may be intentional, though.
No, I think it was. But it was just like, because my wife's like, she goes, "Do you notice everyone was fat?" And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "I think they've been living a little high on the hog now that they're respectable and stable and not always on the run and whatnot. So they're living a little better." And I think you see that actually in that first action sequence when Adam shows up.
Yeah.
Drax is doing a lot of huffing and puffing. And you know what? And let me just say something else. Finally, it took 3 movies. I was genuinely impressed with Drax as a warrior in this film, and I hadn't over the first 2 movies.
Well, yeah, there's some good action in this. It's absurd at times, but generally speaking, there's some pretty good action in this one. I mean, I think that there's some unevenness to this film. Tonal shifts that don't always exactly work as they jump from essentially just there's a couple different narrative stories going on. One predominantly in the past in some flashbacks, and then finally coming and connecting with the main storyline. It's I can't say that I'm not overly disappointed with it. I think generally I like it. I think they should have switched away from Star-Lord in the second film and made that a Yondu film.
Yeah.
And I think so. I think they should have kind of been doing this all along, where they kind of jump. Star-Lord's a great introduction, fine, but then let the stories go in other directions. Because I'm really not that enamored with Star-Lord, and I don't know if that's because I'm not particularly enamored with what Chris Pratt has done with his fame since becoming Star-Lord, or what exactly factors into that. Um, I guess his shtick isn't as interesting as some of the other characters' shticks now, and Rocket's was certainly. I'm glad we got to explore that story, in the sense that it had kind of been set up with the shot where we see him without his jacket on or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it's in the second film, or the first. I don't remember.
On the first
which
one in the prison.
Okay, yeah, and you're just like, oh my gosh, something they've done some serious rewiring on this guy. And so, yeah, and there are aspects of that story that I think work really well. I think there's some aspects that don't hold up exactly. But I think for the most part, it works for me. It's a bit long. I think James Gunn has a clear affection for this universe and these characters. And so when we hit that final act, it slows things down radically to try to spend more time with all of them. Even after the big fight happens, there's kind of this winding down period where you have the dancing, and it's like Ewok Village.
Yeah, it was very drawn out, and I wasn't necessarily a fan of that. That needed to just get it wrapped up. I as soon as it opened, I'm like, oh, clearly they shot the holiday special while they were shooting this, and I knew that in my head, but I didn't really acknowledge it till this movie opened, and I was like, oh yeah, it's the same. And I didn't really care for the holiday special because I didn't really care for Mantis and Drax on the go. In that movie, and I just didn't. I understand that it was silly. I think Marvel's done better short stuff. Again, Werewolf by Night was a much better one-off than the Guardians Holiday Special.
That's kind of become, and I think will until something unsees it, but the go-to for, look, you can do short, unrelated things that may eventually be connected, and you can do them really well, and you don't actually have to connect them. Because now you could have any of those characters pop up in a Marvel film, and it wouldn't be like, well, what are they doing here? Well, it would be not in that sense. You would say, well, what are they doing here? But not like as in the judgment sort of.
I wonder if there would be a way for them to do away with like the credit scenes, and instead, like a month after a movie opens in the theaters, they release a 20-minute short on Disney Plus that has that's standalone, but it acts to impart all of that bonus scene kind of stuff.
I would, yeah.
So then, you watch the film when it opens, and it's like, oh, and then it's like, oh yeah, and don't forget, next Wednesday we're going to drop that 20-minute. Oh, let's go watch the movie again.
Yeah.
And then watch that short. I think that would be kind of neat, because then, when you release it to streaming or on video, then you can just drop that at the end of the credits, just tack it on.
Yeah.
And then then you've reunited them. But I think it might be an interesting thing to try, depending on the project. Like, I think if they ever get Blade made, that might be cool if they're planning to tie that in. I think that might be an interesting way to do it.
But hey, look, if you enjoy what you're seeing and hearing on the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast, why not take a second to click subscribe if you're on YouTube, click follow wherever you're listening to us. Follow us on Twitter at VS Movie Podcast. Same over on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, it's Visually Stunning Movie Podcast. That would be awesome for us. We appreciate you listening. And now let's get back to the show.
Sure, and they're obviously capable of doing that. It's just a question of, is that something they want to do?
Yeah.
And I think that it is a time for experimentation, because I don't know how you feel about this, but this did not feel like this felt, and it's not its fault necessarily, but this was supposed to initially come out a couple years ago. And it really felt like it was supposed to come out a couple years ago. Narrative wise, it felt like it was more of a nostalgia film. Not quite to the extreme that Black Widow was, where we're jumping way
I was going
back,
to say, you're thinking Black Widow feel.
but not quite there, but still kind of like, oh yeah, remember when they used to make these movies? Sort of thing.
Yeah.
It does, it feels like it doesn't fit into the current phase or even the last phase. It feels like kind of a holdover from the original story narrative, and kind of an additional farewell of sorts to that sort of era of the MCU. And I think that's okay.
No, I can see where you're coming from on that, and again, it's a part of that might be, this is James Gunn's last hurrah.
Yeah.
So
and I think there is some truth to that, and I think they're also, and I don't know that we would surprise anyone by saying, there's some big changes that come in this film, and so it does have just kind of this somewhat different feeling than the others, and yeah, and is that going to upset some people? Maybe. I don't think this to me, this doesn't feel like how Ant-Man Quantumania felt, in the sense that Ant-Man and the Wasp, and that it wasn't an Ant-Man and the Wasp film at all.
Right.
Really. This one,
this is still clearly a Guardians film.
It's still a Guardians film. So it's not like they've forgotten, how to center a narrative on a franchise, but
right.
But yeah, there's absolutely a different tone to this, and it goes to places that are different than where it's been before, and
some of them are good. Like I said, there's some good stuff in here, but this movie runs long again.
It does, and I think a lot of that is it's down to James Gunn not really being ready to, let this thing that did so much for his career, just go.
Yeah.
And it's understandable, and I don't think, but I think a lot of artists, in the back of their heads, they can think, well, okay, we're saying this is, I'm finishing off this trilogy, but, in a couple of years I could come back maybe and do something. But
and even the way it ends, someone else can come in.
Yes, but for James, this is it. Just the way that his career has worked out, he's not going to be popping in 5 years. Maybe 15. Right. I guess is not out of the question, but it's going to be a while before he's ever even able to think, of these characters. And so we get the kind of the Lord of the Rings thing, where everybody gets their kind of final moment, and we can't move forward until everyone gets their acknowledgement, and in a strange way that also continues through the credits. So everyone always is like, well, every Marvel movie that comes out, and I think you might have said this, is the best Marvel movie since XX.
I did, yes, the best. This the best Marvel movie since Endgame, and it's like, this is clearly the best movie since Endgame. I lost you.
I would agree with that. I think. You there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I would think it is actually. I think I would. You could have that argument. This is the best movie since Endgame, but it's also one that's connected to Endgame in a way that some of these newer films aren't, in that the character is there and whatnot. Yeah. But and again, I liked Doctor Strange, and if it had done a couple things differently, I think I'd feel really different about that. I mean, I'd be all in on that movie rather than just 75% in on that movie.
And you're talking Multiverse of Madness, and that 75% is Sam Raimi.
Yeah. So probably, but but this one I can at least look at and go, okay, look, if they cut out about 15, 20 minutes,
Yep.
probably be a really, really quite solid, film. It wouldn't, and I can live with it being a little bloated. So it may in fact be the best film since in the Marvel universe since Endgame. I that to me for the first time in a while doesn't feel like someone who's just trying to get their name on a poster.
Right.
That may actually be, the case at this point.
Yeah, I think that Marvel should just never use that quote ever again. Just because it means nothing. It just,
Well,
I mean, not just, since Endgame. It's like, no, that blurb means nothing on any movie anywhere. It just doesn't. Best picture of the, it's like, no. Just stop with that. That people know that's garbage.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it doesn't, it actually kind of works in their disadvantage because it suggests that they haven't really had a good one since.
Right.
It's kind of,
that's true.
That's how, that's where that kind of ends up. And it's like, oh, well, if all these films are the best films since, well, then heavy, because it would be something else if they said the best film since Wakanda Forever or best film since, but they're not. They're going, even further.
They're going all the way back.
Yeah.
To the one people can't argue about. Yeah, I know.
Anyway,
I think it's just
no, it's and there are, it's no secret there are critics who love to get their names on things. I've been fortunate enough to get my I've been quoted in 2 different films in the ad campaigns, but that was and that's an honor, and that's kind of, oh, look, that's cool, but I think for me, I'd rather have some integrity, and unfortunately there are actually 2 films that I do like, Mad Max Fury Road and A Monster Calls. Both of those, like, I'm perfectly happy to be but there's some that eventually it's like you got to be like, look at all these films that your name is on as a marvelous, fantastic, brilliant, best thing ever made, and they're just, for whatever reason, they're not, and they're clearly not.
Right.
I don't know. And the fact is that they've started to have to dig deeper and deeper into the woods and the weeds and whatever to find these comments, because I think we live in I think once upon a time you could say these things and nobody could track and look, but in the age of the internet,
yeah,
you can't just say something outrageous about how much you love a film once, and then when it comes out on DVD, hate it, or when it was released on, you can't get away with that sort of stuff anymore. That did happen sometimes in the past. So anyway, yeah. So,
well, like I said, I've had blurbs used twice. One on a little film, which, okay, it's a little film, and then the other one they grabbed the least I never would have guessed they would have taken like a complete sentence out of a tweet and put, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret.
Oh, good job.
And I was like, and I didn't think it was a super spectacular sentence to be pulling. I mean, it was positive, but it wasn't, a bombastic kind of sentence. But they used it. I was just like, wow, that's, nice to be read.
Yeah.
but I was just like, that's not, it wasn't typical of what I see on all these little splash screens. So I was like, okay. I was excited and surprised, and I thought it was cool, but that wasn't why I wrote it.
But I would say that that's also a movie where you're, that it's not a film that's given to hyperbole, although it is, on face value. There is a lot about that film that I think is pretty surprising. But anyway, yeah.
So, but that's a topic for another time.
That's a topic for another time. So yeah, I think Guardians, while I have some issues with various points and like the tone and the pacing and the general length of it, I left the theater more invested in the characters and those stories than I have in quite some time with a Marvel film. So it seems like they've had a hard time sticking their landings. And again, yes, this landing takes a little while to unwrap,
Yes.
or to come out. But I'm okay with it. I'm interested to a great extent to what happens. It doesn't really tie into anything that we know, but because it already has a background, I'm okay with that.
Right.
There are things that I'm genuinely, a little excited about that could happen.
Yeah. Well, this is different. This is an offshoot, not a lead-in. Whereas most of the more recent stuff all feels like lead-ins. Obviously, this can lead into things, but it is more of an offshoot of what has come before rather than a lead into something else. Quantumania is clearly a lead into something else. Eternals was clearly a lead into something else. Doctor Strange, again, there's an argument there whether it or this is the best movie since Endgame. But that's an offshoot that can also lead. That is more of a lead in than this is. But it does feel more of an offshoot. And probably also because it has the added bonus of being tied into the Spider-Verse, actively tied into the Spider-Verse. So
it feels like a million years ago.
I know, right? It's one of the few post Endgame movies that I actually purchased.
Yeah.
Which again, I'm a completist generally, but after Endgame, I bought Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, and that might be the only one. I bought Black Widow because it's not really a post-Endgame film. So that's probably why. But it's like, no, the other ones I have them in my list, and maybe I'll buy them at some point. I'll probably pick this one up. But that's, I love my physical media, but I don't know if I can't say, yep, I'm going to run right out and get it when it's available. But it's weird. No, I was happier with this one than I have been recently with some of the other ones. It's not perfect. Yeah, it's got some weird shifts. But I like the heart of the story. So, and I don't mean just the way that he's banging at your heart, but the core of the story in here, I liked, and and obviously it it'll make you cry in a couple spots or nearly cry in a couple spots. And a lot of Marvel movies don't do that.
No,
it's just action, bang, bang.
Sure, and a lot of the movies don't even approach that right now. I think Guardians, if you look at the second film, was, well, actually, you could say all three of them were built on a more of an emotional family sort of connection sort of thing. Where the Avengers was more of the cool kids hanging out. Guardians was always kind of about the freaks.
Yeah.
Coming together because no one else would have them, and and I think that makes their relationships a little different.
Yeah.
I just think that there was and is something special about the Guardians in the sense that you can do things in that universe that you can't really do anywhere else in the Marvel universe. To an extent now you can to a certain degree, but it's because of them that you can do some of this stuff. I'm on the go see this. Please go see this. Because this one I'd like. I don't usually care money making whatever, but
right.
I mean, you want the films you like to do well, but ultimately that doesn't change the way you feel about a film. But this one, I think people will like it, and I think they'll like where it went. And I think after some of the disappointment that we've had in the past couple films, that I think that this will generate some goodwill, and hopefully that can continue on into the Marvels, which I think is going to actually be the one that's really important for Disney to see.
Yes.
How far audiences are willing to go with Marvel at this point.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of analysis done on this one in terms of box office, and in terms of how it is moving forward. I don't think it's not going to lose money. Does it do $1 billion? I don't
I
know.
have no idea.
But does it make a magical number that makes everyone go, okay, nobody can say it's a flop? Because really, Marvel would really like that at this point. They would love for no one to be able to come out and say, yeah, it's a flop. So we'll see how it goes. The Rotten Tomatoes score from critics, obviously right now, as we record this, is at 79%. There is no audience yet. We'll see if that holds up and see where the audience falls, because they're the ones that plunk down the cash and decide if they're going to see a film more than once. Which I think is really where Marvel's been losing it, is in the rewatchability. People, they don't like a film enough to pay to see it twice or 3 times. So we'll see what happens with this one. But yeah, it's like I said, I'm fine with it. I'm like a 6.5, 7.
Yeah.
So I'm in there. 79 is not unreasonable to me.
No, I think that's about right. I don't want the irony there being 20-something% of critics think you shouldn't see it, and I think that's not accurate. But I think that the 80% on a 1 to 100 graded scale is accurate. So
yeah, that seems reasonable. So, all right, so that is Guardians. We have nothing to screen this week, amazingly enough. Except nothing in theaters.
Yeah, I'll have something to catch up with, I'm sure. So
yeah, well, we like I said, we still need to talk about we need to talk about Mando season 3.
Yeah.
We need to talk about Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which is a surprising little film. And we could, if we wanted to, talk about Ghosted on Apple TV Plus. There's a show on Apple TV. Speaking of Apple TV, that's going to be coming out on the 5th, I believe. Called Silo, which seemed at first glance to be a typical post-apocalyptic or unknown apocalyptic thing. And I'm 3 episodes in. It's interesting. I like the world they've built. I see a lot of comparisons to other things, and I think I figured a couple of things out already, but we'll see how that shakes out. Rebecca Ferguson is in it. Will Patton is in it. So it's an interesting. Tim Robbins is in. I mean, it's, again, we talk about Apple. They don't skimp when they buy and or make stuff. So I'm going to be interested to see where this one goes over its run. So I'm going to get back to watching some of that today as well. But yeah, so that's an upcoming series on Apple TV Plus that so far I'm not down on, which is nice. I hate finding TV that I'm down on. So, but yeah, so that's Guardians this week. That's this Friday's big release. It's going to have the calendar to itself for a couple of weeks before anything comes after it seriously at that point. And then we'll see. And then we'll be coming up on things like Flash, Mission Impossible here over the next couple months, Indiana Jones. We'll see how all those because that's 3 huge titles over the summer. That DC, Lucasfilm, and what Paramount for, I think it's Paramount for Mission Impossible. So yeah, it'll be an interesting few weeks when those 3 movies come out. And of course they did bump the Marvels from July to get out of that mess back to November. So we'll see how that shakes out by the end of the year. But we'll see how Guardians does when it opens, and I'm sure we'll have some thoughts on that as well. So thanks for coming on, Ryan. We will talk again probably this week, if not definitely next week. So until we get back to everyone, don't forget to like us, follow us on social media. You know how that works. Until next time, I am Mark. That is Ryan. Bye, Ryan.
See you guys.
And we will talk to everyone later.